The horrors that occurred inside walls of St. Joseph's Mission are still very real for those who lived them.
The Williams Lake First Nation announces the discovery of 93 potential human burial sites on the grounds of a former residential school. The chief calling it a heartbreaking discovery for the community.
Good evening. Another disturbing chapter of Canada's history unfolded today in BC, where a First Nation revealed dozens of unmarked graves at the site of a former residential school.
Many of these details are highly troubling, but community leaders want you to hear them to help understand the legacy of abuse and neglect. Penny Daphlos reports.
Historic photos depict St. Joseph's Mission Residential School as the church wanted it seen, pastoral and idyllic. But delving into what actually happened behind those walls.
He has led our investigation team into the darkest recesses of human behavior.
After 8 intense months of archival research and technical analysis, the Williams Lake First Nation is revealing a horrific legacy of mistreatment and abuse.
Our team has recorded not only stories involving the murder and disappearance of children and infants, they have listened to countless stories of systematic torture, starvation, rape, and sexual assault of children at St. Joseph's Mission.
Ground-penetrating radar has identified 93 anomalies believed to contain bodies, more than half of which are likely associated with the school.
We knew that Kamloops was just the tip of the iceberg.
It was the discovery of more than 200 suspected unmarked graves at Tk'emlúps-te-Secwépemc First Nation that prompted the search in Williams Lake. A crisis support team is now there for survivors with more help online and a dedicated hotline.
The world is watching quite closely how we handle this situation.
With the announcement of more records being released, the investigation team is hopeful that the federal government will make proactive and full disclosure a top priority.
Ottawa is pledging to do so, but First Nations leaders already know
there's going to be more recoveries for certain there, and there will be recoveries across Canada.
It's unlikely we will ever know how many Indigenous children were forced to leave their families and either vanished or had their lives forever shattered.
We have heard detailed descriptions of how the unwanted babies of certain priests at St. Joseph's were burned in the incinerator.
Details that are difficult to hear, but important, leaders say, on the path to reconciliation.
I think we're getting to a place where we are starting to acknowledge the truth of this country and some of the horrific things that happened to our children.
For more details on this story and information on supports for residential school survivors, you can go to the article on the main page of our website. That is ctvnews.vancouver.ca.
Penny, of course, these difficult stories always tough to hear, and despite the numerous discoveries right across the country this year and the stories of abuse that we've heard from residential school survivors and their families, some people still insist on characterizing residential schools as somewhat beneficial for Indigenous children back then. So what did First Nations leaders have to say about that today?
Well, the chief actually addressed that, and he really emphasized downplaying the abuse and neglect actually compounds the trauma that survivors are still dealing with. Remember, St. Joseph's Mission didn't close until 1981. And what really struck me was the chief saying that we can't have another generation of Canadians growing up without understanding the impact of these institutions on so many people. Mijang Scott.
Thank you, Penny.